Google has made a foldable phone, but the defining feature of the Pixel Fold probably isn't what you're thinking. Right, clickbait title to one side. I am normally an iPhone user, but I always have an Android phone in the other pocket, but I do change that Android phone nearly as much as I change my pants. There's just loads of these devices coming out all the time. The challenge is that most of these phones look very similar, but occasionally a phone comes along which is interesting. The problem is that it costs £1,749 for starters. If you increase the storage to 512 gig, you pay £1,869. So it's really expensive, and at the time of filming in the UK, you can't get it until the end of August. The good news with that though, is that you have plenty of time to work out if this is for you. But before we get into that, just a quick word from today's sponsor, which is Pitaka, and possibly, in fact no, definitely, the easiest phone case I've ever found to attach to a foldable phone. It's also the slimmest and the lightest. This is the Mag Easy Case 3 for the Pixel Fold, and like I mentioned, it's the slimmest and lightest case for Google's new phone. And that is no mean feat, because cases for foldable phones, in my experience, aren't very good at all. They're very bulky, heavy and ugly. This one isn't. It's absolutely fantastic for two reasons. The first one is because it's crafted from military grade aramid fibre, so it's not just light and thin, it's also very strong as well. But the biggest trick this thing pulls off is the magnet system built into the back of the case. So basically, when you attach this to your Pixel Fold, it gives the phone MagSafe compatibility. And that means you can use it with MagSafe accessories such as the Mag Easy grip and the battery bank from Pitaka. This really is the best way to keep your very expensive Pixel Fold safe and scratch-free, and you get that fantastic MagSafe compatibility. If you want to find out more, just click that link below. The Pixel Fold is powered by the Google Tensor G2 chip and has one RAM option, which is 12 gigabytes, and there are two storage options, either 256 gig or 512. And obviously it runs Android 13, and obviously it is the purest version of Android you'll find anywhere. Just like every foldable phone, the Pixel Fold is a chunky little device, which it's going to be because it's got a folding screen. However, it's also one of the thinnest. And I love this design. If we put it up against the Pixel 7 Pro, you can see it's kind of a squashed version of this phone. Immediately, you feel like you're getting a lot for your money, which is very important given the price. The only thing I'm a bit disappointed by is the camera housing, which looks fantastic straight out of the box, but just like the Pixel 7 Pro, it does scratch easily. That's pretty much the only downside of the design, I think. The hinge, we're told, is the most durable on the market, according to Google. You can see on Samsung's device there's a bit of a gap where the hinge is, so it doesn't shut completely flush. This does. There's no gap when the device is shut. As for the hinge on this, it's very nice. It's very confident feeling. It's nice and stiff without being too stiff, so you can angle it pretty much any angle you want. The only thing to bear in mind is that, like most foldables, once this is completely folded open, it's not totally flat. So it's not a 180 degrees opening, it's about 178 degrees apparently. Does that matter? I don't think so, and again, it's one of those trade-offs with current foldables. We're promised 24-hour battery life with this, and in my experience, that is easily achievable. My normal use case with these sort of phones is email, web surfing, checking YouTube stats, using social media, watching some YouTube. If I do that throughout the day, I can sail past 24 hours with this. But you do need to charge it the next morning at some stage. So it's not a 2-day phone, but you will easily get past a day with it. Biometric security is handled via a fingerprint sensor on the power button, which works very reliably, but I wish we had the underscreen fingerprint reader that you get on the Pixel 7 Pro. I don't really know why we don't get that, but on the next Fold, I'd love to see underscreen fingerprint readers, which I absolutely love, and facial recognition. I'll come onto the camera system later, but we do need to talk about this massive internal display. So this great big internal display on the Pixel Fold measures 7.6 inches diagonally. And that pretty much matches the size of the Z Fold 4, which isn't charged at the moment, but you'll have to take my word for it. They are pretty much the exact same screen size. And this display really is a very lovely thing. Google has gone for an OLED panel with a 2208 by 1840 resolution and a dynamic refresh rate of 120 Hz. It's a really bright display as well, so you can expect 1000 nits of brightness for HDR content and up to 1450 nits of brightness at its peak. And like all foldable displays, the Pixel Fold's internal display uses ultra-thin glass and has a protective plastic screen protector attached in the factory. Like every foldable, I do need this for longer to test its durability, which I will do and I'll report back, but I've not had any early adopter issues. There's no weird creaking, no cracking, no peeling. It feels absolutely fine and, more importantly, it gives me confidence. However, again, just like every single foldable phone, this does have one element which I know bothers some people, and that is the crease. And you just can't get away from these creases on foldable phones. And yes, you can see it when you move this thing in certain light. It's very, very obvious. You can feel it when you move your finger across the screen horizontally. The big question is, does it bother you while you're using this? I think there are two things to bear in mind about this. The first thing is that if a crease like this really bothers you, and I mean really bothers you, then foldable phones are not for you at the moment. The second thing to bear in mind is the trade-off. So like anything in tech, this crease is there because it's a trade-off to give you something else. And the thing that it gives you is this absolutely massive canvas. And if you've never used a foldable device before, it's very hard to get your head around it. You do need to get these things into your hands. Because trust me, when you do, you will be impressed. And yes, there are big bezels on this phone. I think the reason for that is the hinge design. The hinge, as Google says, is one of the strongest on the market, but that means it's quite thick. So there's a very thick part of the hinge here, which continues as a bezel. Again, if that really bothers you, this phone isn't for you. But again, if you can look past that and the crease, you benefit from this display. And it offers loads of benefits that you'll use each day. Multitasking is a great example of this. So for instance, if I have Maps open, which is amazing on this display, by the way, I can bring up the taskbar, grab Chrome, stick it on the right hand side, and suddenly we have dual app multitasking. And it's really fast. You can change the size of each app if you need to. Very responsive. I use this much more than I thought I would. The only thing to bear in mind is that although most first-party Google apps have been updated to make use of the Pixel Fold's internal display, most of the third-party apps that I use, so things like Notion, Slack, Brain FM, and a few others, haven't been. And what happens if an app hasn't been updated? Well, let's show you Instagram as an example. Basically, it windows it, so it puts it in the middle of the screen and gives you these two great big black borders. So it's not the best experience, really. It's going to take time for developers to make the changes to their apps. It's also worth noting that if you start life on the front display, so if I've got photos open, for instance, on here, and then decide to open the Fold, it carries on where I left off. And as you can see, because Photos has been optimized for this big screen, I get more information. The only thing to bear in mind is that it doesn't work the other way around. So if I start life on the big screen and then close the phone, it locks it. But that does bring me to the surprising defining feature of the Pixel Fold. The Samsung Z Fold4 was my first introduction to folding phones, and I fell in love with it pretty quickly. The only thing I don't like about it is that front display. It's just too narrow for anything apart from scrolling through stuff. Enter the Pixel Fold and its utterly fantastic front display. This is a 5.8-inch OLED display with a 17:4:9 aspect ratio, which weirdly makes it the Pixel Fold's greatest asset. In fact, I'd take this display size on pretty much any phone. It's such a perfect thing to hold Fold and use one-handed. It feels great in your pocket as well, again because it's shorter than the Pixel 7 Pro. That also means that you can use it without doing lots of weird finger gymnastics to get to the top of the screen. It's brighter than the internal display as well, more so on paper really than in practice, but that is worth noting, and it features the same variable 120Hz refresh rate and HDR support. In one fell swoop, Google has solved the main issue that I had with the Z Fold 4 and given us a front display on a folding phone that you can actually use. The challenge with this is that it does detract a little bit from this massive display inside, so I find myself using this more than this. And again, I think that reveals that you really need to want a foldable phone to make the price worth it, because you could just get away with that front screen, it's that good, but you just need to know and be aware of the fact and need to use that internal screen, because the best aspect of this Pixel Fold is not what you think at all, it's this. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. The camera system that you get in the Pixel Fold is pretty much identical to what you get in the Pixel 7 Pro, and that is a very good thing indeed if you like pixel photography. I am a massive fan of the photos these things take. In fact, they are, and I've said this before multiple times, they are my favourite smartphone images. And this shot that I took on the Pixel Fold in Coniston in the Lake District 2 days ago reveals why. It is genuinely picture postcard perfect. Now, these images that I took in the beautiful Lake District might impress you as much as they impress me, or you might be nonplussed. This is why this element of any smartphone review is completely subjective. But what I love about Google's approach to smartphone photography is that it never fails to capture that moment, no matter where you are or what you're taking photos of. I think the zoom range works fantastically. I think the dynamic range is superb, and that pixel look, that pixel processing means you never have to do anything, no faffing whatsoever in post. The big difference between the Pixel 7 Pro and the Pixel Fold is the ways that you take selfies. So with this, you take them in the normal way with the selfie cam. With this, you can do that. There's a selfie cam up here, but there's also one in there, and you can use the main camera system as a selfie camera and use the front display as the monitor. That is a pretty clever use of a foldable design. The only thing I'd say is that the other two main selfie cameras, so the one on the front display and the one on the internal display, are pretty good. And also, holding the phone like this to take selfies, it's not impossible, but it's a little bit unwieldy. But the camera system in general on the Pixel Fold is just so good. I think Google has completely nailed the form factor. I think the internal display, if you can look past the crease and the bezels, is lovely. I think the front display, as mentioned earlier, is the best thing about this phone. The camera, if you like pixel photography, is just biblically good. The challenge really is that price, which you just cannot look past. To make that price justifiable, you have to really want a foldable phone from Google. The good news is that if you do really want that, you are in for an absolute treat. This is my favorite foldable phone to date, but I will be comparing it with Samsung's update to their Z Fold, which let's guess is going to be called the Z Fold 5. So if you don't want to miss that comparison, make sure you subscribe. And if you want to see something at the other end of the pixel scale, keep watching for a link to my full Pixel 7a review.